What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the PikaPikaPaPa, and here we are with another really cool, really awesome data set that's coming to us directly from TCG Player. And you all know how excited I get when I get information directly from a website like TCG Player. When you think about the velocity that cards sell on their site for, when you think about the magnitude, the overall volume, it's just really cool to get information from a site like that because it's really relevant and it is an indicator of what's going on at the macro level of the hobby. And if you're a long-term collector or investor like I am, then that is what really matters. The other thing that I think is cool is it kind of cuts through any unintended biases, like any favorite eras or favorite character or anything like that. This is what it is. This is actual sales data from TCG Player, and because of that, this list is really diverse. We're going to have cards from XY era, cards from Sun and Moon, cards from Sword and Shield, cards from Scarlet and Violet, and we're only talking about the top 10 cards, so that much diversity in a list of 10 cards. Again, I think it's just really exciting. It shows what's going on in the hobby as a whole. This is not just, the most recent sets and cards and eras that are starting to pop off. As I said, all the eras seem to be having a really, really strong 2024. Doesn't mean that things will continue forever. Markets go up, markets come down. Nothing moves linearly up to the right or down and to the right. We're going to have ups and downs along the way. But I tell you what, I am putting together a video that's going to come out tomorrow, which is really relevant to this one. And the idea of the video for tomorrow is I take the last 2 years worth of TCG Player information, and I'm hoping to give us some predictive indicators so that when this video comes out next year and we're talking about the 10 biggest Pokemon TCG price shifts of 2025, we'll have already been able to understand some of those cards that are on the list and hopefully gave us a little bit of an inside shot into getting them earlier than everybody else. I've already got the data pulled. I'm going to shoot it after this video. Super cool, so I hope you get a chance to watch it tomorrow as well. But with that being said, listen, we do cool stuff like this all the time, so if you get in the video, if you're having fun, if you enjoy the content, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. If you like what you see, give us a thumbs up, and if you got questions or comments, drop them down below. So with all of that out of the way, let's start looking at the 10 cards that have gained the most in value on TCG Player over the last year. And I think it's really cool that we start off with the Blaziken from Chilling Reign. And this is a card that it's interesting. Chilling Reign is one of the sets where I'm interested to see how it's going to perform in the long run. I think a Lost Origin is obviously a top set. I think Brilliant Stars is a little bit of a sleeper set. Obviously, you got, Evolving Skies there in the #1 spot. And, it's just going to be interesting to see where Chilling Reign shakes out. Lots of really awesome art, alt arts all over the place. But it's going to be interesting to see because you don't have any of those big name characters at the very top. Although Blaziken, don't sleep on Blaziken. The kicking chicken has been absolutely kicking butt along the way. And the price for this card on January 1st was $161, and now it's coming in at $292. Now, if you look at that price graph, there's something I want to call out before we get into the rest of this video. You see that price spike, right? That's when all of the booster boxes for the Sword and Shield era started to sell out on the Pokemon Center in the US. There was a lot of FOMO everywhere. Booster boxes spiked, alt art prices spiked, and we knew things would come back down, and they did. But the thing about this Blaziken card is you have seen cards like the Giratina, you've seen cards like the Gengar, you've seen cards like the Moonbreon, right? Like ever since they've come down, they've started to spike back up. Well, the Blaziken has not followed that same pattern. Matter of fact, it is starting to flatten out a little bit. So that means one of two things, and I don't know which one it is. Either it's a late bloomer, and we're going to see this card start to spike up once those Giratinas, the Gengars, the Moonbreons start to reach really, really high price points, and people start to look for other alt arts that are a little more affordable. This Blaziken could totally pop off. Or the Blaziken's going to settle in, and a $300 card is nothing to shake a fist at. So I don't know what's going to happen in 2025 to this Blaziken card. I don't know what's going to happen to Chilling Reign. I love the set. I have a ton of Chilling Reign booster boxes. I think it's a great investment, but it's just going to be interesting to see where this card and Chilling Reign booster boxes kind of stack up once we get even further along into the Scarlet and Violet era and Sword and Shield gets further and further into the rearview mirror. But an awesome card to start the list off with, and again, it's up $129, up 80% over the last year. Next card on the list, I told you there was going to be some XY cards, and very interestingly enough, this was on my Christmas wish list when I did a video on that just before Christmas. This is the Team Aqua card, and this card is an absolute stunner. And because it's on a personal collection list for me, I don't really look at the prices that much because it's just something that I want, and I'm less interested in the way the price moves, and I'm more interested in just, hey, someday I'd really like to have this in the personal collection. But man, you pay a high price for waiting for this card, because in the beginning, in January, this was a $95.80 card, and guess what? It is all the way up to $200 now, which is absolutely crazy, up over 100% over the course of the year. And again, I love to see this kind of interest in a set that's this old, in a card that's this old. It just goes to show you that there are more than just people who are entering the hobby now that are focused on the here and now, right? They're looking, you know, far back a little bit, and this is an absolute stunner of a card, very worthy of being on this list. And it'll be interesting to see how high is for this card. How high can it get, you know, over the next year or so. So I'll be keeping an eye on it. And you know, hey, listen, if I want it now, I'm gonna have to pay 200 bucks for it, where a year ago, if I just pulled the personal collection trigger, then I could have had it for sub 100. But lesson learned, it is what it is. Next card on the list right here is, of course, a Leafeon VMAX from Evolving Skies. Evolutions are going crazy all over the place, so it should be no surprise that you see this card on the list. Look how flat this card was in the beginning of the year. January 1, it was $165. And it was staying there. I mean, it spent 3 or 4 months in the beginning of 2024 at that $165 level before it went through that spike that we talked about due to booster boxes selling out. And then it started to come back down. But then, unlike the Blazin that we looked at first, this card has been working its way back up. And I do think with Prismatic Evolutions coming out, everybody's feverish over Evolutions. I do think these cards will continue to climb in price for a little while. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't see some kind of regression in the future. I have no idea. But I do think that whenever you're talking about singles cards, you know, investing in cards like Evolutions from a set like Evolving Skies, which is the set of the Sword and Shield era, I think you can do far worse than that. There's a whole lot of safety when you're investing in these types of cards. So it's really cool to see this one up over $300 right now. What a crazy jump in price over the last 12 months. Really, really cool. And I know I'm personally taking some lessons away from this when we start to figure out what happens with Scarlet and Violet cards and sets here towards the end of the era. The next one we're talking about is a card I have been absolutely obsessed with ever since it came out. And most importantly, ever since we had line of sight into what the gem rate for this card was going to be, this Magikarp from Paldea Evolved, stunning card, stunning artwork, but the big story here is the gem rate is absolutely abysmal. The first year of Scarlet and Violet, really across the board, up until 151, the gem rates are incredibly low, and I think that is one of the things that is going to help make these early era sets from Scarlet and Violet far more valuable than some of the early era sets that we have seen in the past, because there is some really cool art. And then you combine that with the fact that they're incredibly hard to get in those Gem Mint 10, those PSA 10 holders, which makes the PSA 10 versions super expensive. All of that combines to just a really, really awesome, you know, long-term prospect for some of these cards. So look at this again, January, this was a $61 card, and today it is sitting at $200, up over 200% over the course of the year, up about $140 in total. My gosh. Just a really, really cool card with a really cool story behind it. And I certainly think, man, I think PSA 10s are going for like $1,200 right now, which is out of this world. I think this is going to be a fun one to watch up into 2025. And I have just enjoyed watching it throughout the course of 2024. Next card on the list right here, you got the Gengar and Mimikyu GX. This was a card that, again, I had on my Christmas list, and, you know, it's just had a heck of a year. Team Up is the equivalent, if not the better version of, say, Evolving Skies from Sun and Moon. You can't really compare the two. Team Up was a super short printed set in an era that was probably less printed than Sword and Shield to begin with. So when you think about the overall population, I mean, Team Up is going to be infinitesimal compared to some of these more recent eras. But this card, you got Gengar. Gengar is wildly popular. It's a tag team card with Mimikyu. I mean, there's not much more you can ask for considering the characters on the card, considering the set that it comes from, and you can see it is not disappointed. It was at $271 in the beginning of the year. You know, it is all the way up to $300, almost $400 right there. Just an incredibly strong year for this card. And again, I love seeing that we've got Sun and Moon cards on this list. We've got an XY on this list. We've got Sword and Shield on this list. We've got Scarlet and Violet already this early into the video. So it just goes to show you, how excited everybody is about all different parts of the Pokemon collecting space right now. Next card on this list is the Gutina V from Lost Origin. You heard me talk about it earlier. The interesting call out for me on this card is you'll see in January it was all the way up at $235. Now it is all the way up to $502. And when you think about gem rate, I talked about the gem rate in the Magikarp and how I thought that was a big, big plus for that card. Out of all of the alt arts in the Sword and Shield era, the big alt arts, the chase cards, thinks your Moonbryon, thinks your Gengar, all of that type of stuff. Those cards have a gem rate really in the high 60, low 70% range. This Gutina V is the lowest gem rate out of all of the chase chase alt art cards in the Sword and Shield era, coming in at sub 50%, coming in at 48%. So I think that is going to drive continued value. I think it's going to drive continued growth, and I think that's going to make this card highly desirable for a long, long, long time. People love cards that are really hard to get in those PSA 10 holders, and this is certainly one of them. The other thing is I called out with the alt arts we've already seen. Remember, you see that spike that we talked about, then you see the subsequent drop. Well, this one is already back up to where that big spike was during the FOMO period of those booster box selling outs in the alt art, which is a really cool takeaway. Like, it's fascinating to see. As I've said in the past, markets go up and markets go down. The question I always have is, on that downside, how much of the gains from the up does it hold on to? Does it hold on to all of them? Does it lose all of them? Does it gain some of them? The fact that in such a short amount of time, this is already back up to that really accelerated FOMO type level is a really cool thing. And again, just another feather in the cap for this card for the long-term prospects of it. Next card on the list, we got a Rayquaza Vmax coming in from Evolving Skies. Absolutely love this card. My 4-year-old pulled this card from a pack. We sent it into PSA, came back into PSA 10. All kinds of warm and fuzzy memories about this card. But again, also love the fact that it has been absolutely crushing it from a price perspective. Started off at $250, and you can see the price pattern there. Followed the same one as the Leafeon, right? Again, this wasn't the Moonbreon. This was, the Rayquaza. So kind of followed that same pattern. It was flat, 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 flat. Went through the period where it spiked up, came back down. And then just like the Giratina we looked at, it is almost back up to that spike level that we saw during the FOMO sellout period. So really cool. And again, Evolving Skies, that is just the benefit of investing and spending your money on the set of the era. It is really, really, really hard to go wrong if you're buying booster boxes or if you're buying chase cards in whatever the set of the era ends up being. I don't think we know what that is for Scarlet and Violet yet. It's going to be impossible for us to know what that is up until all of the sets have been announced and all of the card lists are out there. And even then, it might take a little while for things to flush out. Don't sleep. Remember, Fusion Strike was a $90 booster box for like the first year, for the first 16 months of its existence before it finally got hot and started to pop off. So sometimes it takes a while, but don't be price prohibitive. You know what I mean? We have seen through Evolving Skies that even at really high valuations, those big sets can still give you really strong returns over the long run. So lots of cool lessons, lots of awesome takeaways, and this is why I like looking at data like this. Next one on the list is my favorite card, the Gengar Vmax. You know I'm a wild Gengar fan. Obviously, in this Fusion Strike, we just got done talking about don't sleep on booster boxes because we saw what Fusion Strike did. And another fantastic example here of a card that is up above the previous spike. Just again, speaks volumes for the collector and investor desirability for this card. I think it speaks volumes for the long-term prospects of this. In January, this was a $214 card, and now it is sitting pretty at $512. Absolutely incredible story for this card. Incredible story for Fusion Strike as a whole. My God, it's just been a ton of fun to watch. And there it is. I don't even know what else to say. Just an incredible card, an incredible price, and it's had an incredible year. The next one we're talking about right here, again, another Sun and Moon era card. Obviously a big, big chase card from the Sun and Moon era. The big chase card from the Sun and Moon era. The Latias and Latios from the Team Up set. Obviously, I think Surging Sparks is helping to give this card kind of a renewed interest. Although if you look at the course of the price for the last year, it didn't need Surging Sparks. It has been working its way up ever since January, slowly, steadily. You do see a little bit of a price spike here over the last month, but again, January 1, this card was a $700 card, and now it is sitting over $1,000, sitting at $1,062. And it just, again, when you invest in quality cards from high-end sets, you can expect returns like this. And we'll have to see how this card performs in a market downturn. That's what I'm interested in, is how much of these gains will these cards hold on to. The broader market will downturn at some point. Like, it's just going to happen. Nobody's going to panic. Somebody like me, when the market downturns, that's why I kick up my buying volume, right? Like, I will start investing even more in the Pokemon space when we go through a market downturn. I'll take lessons like what happens to this card, and I'll start to build some profiles together as to what to expect for the hobby for the long run. But this card has obviously had a heck of a year, and I think it's really fun to watch. And of course, the card that we're going to end the video with, which should surprise nobody, is the card of the year, the card of the Sword and Shield era. Could be the card of recent memory, who knows. The card that shows no signs of slowing down. It is already over that Latias and Latios card, even though I guarantee you there are far, far fewer of those Latias and Latios cards out there. But the Moonbreon from Evolving Skies, it started in January at $5 $538, and it is sitting today at $1,411. Just an incredible run for this card. And I remember, I will be the first one to say, when this card was getting hot back a year ago, a year and a half ago, I was raising my hand. I'm like, man, I can't believe it's a $600 ultra modern Pokemon card. Like, there's going to be 15, 16, maybe even at, 5 years from now, there might even be 20,000 of these in PSA 10 holders. I was concerned about the volume. I was concerned that, it might be oversaturated, but guess what? None of that matters. People love the Moonbreon card. This card has just absolutely, no matter what has gone on, you don't see the same spike and drop in this card that you saw in some of the other alt art cards from the Sword and Shield era. Like, it just didn't matter. Yes, it spiked a little bit. Yes, it regressed just a tiny bit, but then it went off like a rocket ship after that. And again, just another great lesson. Whatever the card ends up being from the Scarlet and Violet era, whatever the set ends up being from the Scarlet and Violet era, no matter what your entry point is, as long as you're not paying some stupid price, it's this early in the set or in the era that I do think that it's a very, very safe bet with some awesome long-term returns in it, because just look what the Umbreon's done, look what all the other cards have done, and the market's in a very healthy spot right now. So we'll just have to see what happens, but that's it. Those are the 10 cards according to TCG Player that have gained the most in price in 2024. As I said, I have a really cool video coming out tomorrow that I hope will help us give some kind of early indications as to what those cards might be. The last 2 years have given us plenty of data points to go off of, so we'll have a ton of fun with that. But I hope you have an epic rest of your Sunday. I hope you are excited for a brand new year, and I appreciate you watching so much. Have a great one, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye.